Today we're going to have a hot takes discussion on the top 10 movies that have affected me the most emotionally, or the movies that emotionally resonated with me. I think this is going to be a hot take because a lot of these movies are either movies that aren't known for being emotional, or perhaps people might find strange that I found them to be so impactful. And some of them on the list, maybe other people will actually agree with. But anyway, let's just get into it. So before we get into it, if you like the video, please give it a like, comment. If you enjoy some of my picks, let me know. If you've watched some of them, let me know. Post your top 10 list of movies that maybe affected you emotionally. That would be cool to see as well. We're going to get into it. I just want to put out a general spoiler warning. I will put the image of each movie in the probably right up here or right up here, depending. And there'll be timestamps in the description below if you want to skip a movie. For most of them, I'm going to try and keep it very spoiler-free. If I do start to talk spoilers, I will make it known, but I don't anticipate ruining most of these movies. So you should be okay. But again, if I want to jump into spoilers, I will say something. So before I get into the top 10, I do just want to mention an honorable mention, and that is the Pixar film Up. The first 10 minutes will emotionally destroy anyone almost who watches that movie. And then you can stop watching the movie because the rest of it is pretty stupid. But if you want to just see a really sad story, really sad background, I think that the first 10 minutes of the movie would be an amazing short or something. And so I always think that more people should watch just that part. And then everything after that is just so stupidly childish that I really couldn't get into it. But I will always remember that that first 10 minutes, the first time I saw that really stuck with me. And if you know, you know. And if you don't know, you should go watch it because it's really good. The first couple on this list are movies that I remember emotionally impacting me pretty strongly when I first watched them. But it's been a really long time since I saw them. So upon a rewatch, I have no idea how I'd feel about them. So forgive me if they seem a little strange. Some of them have some pretty bad critical reception, and I'm really surprised upon hearing that after remembering the movies I saw. So number 10 on this list is a bit of a controversial pick, I think. The movie, as far as I can remember, did not do too well. And that's a Robin Williams movie called Bicentennial Man. For those of you who haven't seen it, it is the story of a family who ends up buying a robot, and the robot is acted and voiced by Robin Williams. And this robot kind of grows. Well, the robot doesn't grow, but intelligently grows, I suppose, as the family kind of ages, and he kind of watches this kid grow up. And I really don't remember too much about it, and there's I just remember it really resonating with me. There's something I would like to talk about that's kind of a spoiler, but I'm not going to bother because it's been so long since I've seen this movie. I remember really liking it, and I remember it being pretty cool at the time. Just the idea of this robot living with a family. To be fair, I think that's been done a lot now. I think that is kind of a tropey movie, but when I was a kid, I thought it was a great idea, and it was a very interesting movie, and it had some really strong emotional moments in it, at least from what I remember. And I think that's the movie that I've seen the longest ago on this list, so my opinion on that is probably very jaded because it's been at least 20 years and I would say definitely more probably. So my opinion on that is kind of hard to uh, be too honest on, but I just remember that movie always getting me pretty good. And so that's why it's number 10. Number 9 on this list is going to be the strangest one of the bunch because I don't typically watch this genre at all. But there was one time, way back, 15 years now, I don't really know, when I was home alone, I was really bored. My sister had told me about this romantic drama movie, and I think it's actually a dramedy. I'm not quite sure. Uh, I don't remember it being that funny, but uh, I was bored and I put it in, and I remember this movie just absolutely destroying my core. Uh, and that's actually P.S. I Love You. This movie apparently did not do well critically, and I'm shocked by that. I remember this having so many emotional moments where it was just like, oh my god, this is killing me. Now, I'm not a person who really cries during movies, like, ever, and this one's not really an exception to that, but man, I can't imagine most people watching this movie and not crying. There is some incredibly emotional moments to it. Now, the basic premise of this movie is that there's this couple who's in love, and the guy dies early on, right in the beginning of the movie. It's not a spoiler, and the girl is absolutely destroyed. I think the guy is Gerard Butler, and the girl is Hilary Swank, I think. Uh, and so she finds out that this guy has written letters to her after that were designed to come to her after he died, and they include like instructions of like things that she's supposed to do to kind of like move on, and it's kind of some dates that he kind of set up for her, some things to do, and it's it's an unbelievable movie, honestly. But if you can suspend the disbelief of this, it's really good. From what I remember, it's been a really long time, but it's a sad movie, and it's impactful. I am still shocked that more people don't mention it. But there it is, and I it's been so long since I've seen it. It's hard for me to again talk about this movie. I feel bad even putting it on my list because I think I've only ever seen it once, and I don't know. I remember really enjoying it, but perhaps I should rewatch it because I'm having a very difficult time remembering anything about the movie other than I remember feeling my entire insides being like wanting to be ripped out. And if that's your thing, you might like this movie. All right, so one of the most popular types of movies that I've always liked watching is war films. And so the next one is one of those, and there's a couple more on this list. The first one is the one that I remember the least, and that's why it's number 8 on the list. It's Black Hawk Down. I truly remember not much about this movie. I remember there being some amazingly emotional like death scenes, and I remember just the entire war and conflict being very engaging and interesting to watch. I believe this movie actually has the debut of Orlando Bloom in it, and while I'm not a fan of that actor at all, his role in this movie is quite interesting. Apparently, there's a lot of like controversies surrounding this movie. It's takes place in a war with Somalia, and I guess there is a lot of controversies with the way that the film actually looks compared to what the I guess there was a book written, and I really don't know too much about that, so it's hard for me to really comment on it. And it's been so long since I've seen it, I don't really know much. I don't remember much of it. I just remember the impact it had on me as a younger film watcher of war films, I guess. I guess there isn't really much else I can say about that film, so let's move on to number 7, which is actually another war film right about the same time as Black Hawk Down, I think just 3 years before it, and that's Saving Private Ryan. which is a huge classic film. You know, Tom Hanks and the great war story that came out when I was a kid, and man, did that one hit. That was an awesome movie, and the ending of that film is just so good, and the rest of that film is just so good. Uh, it might be the best like combat focused war film I've ever seen. I would compare it with my favorite, which is well, my favorite war. I guess I was gonna say movie, but it's a mini series, and those are the HBO specials. There's the Pacific, which I think is my favorite, and then there's the one that came before that. I don't recall what it was called. I don't know why. It's a very famous show. Let me look it up. Of course, you all know I'm talking about Band of Brothers, which I had to look up. But yeah, those are awesome. I think that Tom Hanks actually worked on both of those as well. So, you know, the quality of both Saving Private Ryan and those two shows is both phenomenal. And again, it's been a really long time since I've seen Saving Private Ryan. It just resonated when I was younger, and man, I really should rewatch these movies that I'm having a hard time remembering. But if you like a really good war film, Saving Private Ryan is one of the best. Takes place in World War II, which is, in my opinion, the most interesting war out there. But you don't have to listen to me. Not everyone is as fascinated by World War II as I am. Uh, I can't. There's not much to talk about with this movie unless we get into really strong spoilers, and I don't want to do that because the story is just really good, and I think that if I spoiled it for anyone who hasn't seen it, that would be kind of sad. So go out and watch it, and watch Black Hawk Down as well. Black Hawk Down is a much more recent war film compared to Saving Private Ryan, but they're both excellent, and I think they're both my two favorite, like I said, combat focused war stories. Why stop the Tom Hanks train now? Let's get into movie number 6, a movie that I actually just recently rewatched because someone has not seen it, and so me and my family watched it. My family and I, for the writers out there. So, Castaway. What a great, great movie. If you haven't seen Castaway, you're missing out. I don't want to ruin it. The basic story is that Tom Hanks is playing this guy. He delivers packages for FedEx, and his plane ends up crashing, and he is stranded on an island, and that's kind of really all I want to get into. I will say that if you are one of those people that don't like a movie that just kind of ends without having a really good conclusion, I would say that this falls into that. Uh, some people will probably push back on that and say it had a perfect ending, but I was very disappointed with the way the movie ended. Uh, that's just my personal opinion. I wish that there was a bit more closure in a few areas, but hey, I'm not the director, I guess, or the writer, so I don't get to make those decisions. But if you like a really, really emotional movie, Castaway has one of the best scenes, really a couple scenes in it that just, man, all I gotta say is Wilson. A lot of people know what I'm talking about. It's just funny that an inanimate object can make you feel so much. So that's number 6. Let's move on. All right, so now we're entering the top 5, and these movies are the ones that have really stuck with me over time. Like, I remember most of them, pretty much scene by scene, because I've seen most of them multiple times. Now, this first one is going to, or movie number 5, rather, is going to maybe have a bunch of you scratching your heads, and that's because it's a movie that, while I think a lot of people think it's good, I don't think it was critically acclaimed, and I don't think most people will understand the pick until I explain myself. So, that's The Butterfly Effect, an Ashton Kutcher movie. This movie is very okay if you've just seen the regular version. Uh, I'd say it's even good. However, if you haven't seen the director's cut, or if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to see it, I strongly recommend you watch the director's cut because the director's cut was actually the original ending. And apparently, for some unknown reason, the test audience hated this ending and they changed the ending. And the ending is so stupid in the normal one. The ending in the director's cut will completely make you go, wait, what the fuck just happened? Did that really just happen? The answer is yes, it really just happened. And yes, they did end it that way. Now, for those of you who don't know, the butterfly effect's premise is basically that one small thing. I'm sure you've all heard of the theory. If you I can't remember exactly how the theory goes, but it's like if you kill a butterfly now, maybe that could lead to a bunch of events that end up, causing something massive to happen. Because by killing this butterfly, you have now taken the meal from whatever animal who then died, who couldn't have, and it's just a chain of events that becomes something really big. Uh, Similarly, I guess maybe if you lose $1 in your wallet and then you needed to go buy something, but now you're $1 short, so now you can't buy that thing, and then that thing was going to maybe be a gift for the girlfriend that you probably were going to marry if you had been able to get her the gift, but because you couldn't afford the gift, you weren't able to make the gesture, and you've now lost the girl because she got sick of being with someone who doesn't give her gifts. Terrible example, but it's you get the idea. So in the movie, there's this I'm trying to remember. I think it's like a journal, and when Ashton Kutcher writes in it or looks at it, he can then he finds himself in a different uh, time. It's like he can relive the life and change different decisions, and then you see the ramifications of those changes, and then he, you know, realizes something else just got fucked, and so he goes back and tries to keep changing things, and eventually comes to just a crazy ending, and the whole film is just really intriguing, and I just can't emphasize how many parts of that movie just make you like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened, and then it keeps going, it keeps going, and more terrible things keep happening, and the ending smacks you in the face again. Watch the director's cut; it's way better. It's such a fantastic movie, and I really don't want to give too many story spoilers, so I just don't want to talk about the movie anymore. We'll move on. Okay, so movie number 4 is going to also be kind of a head scratcher, I think, and it's more the context of where I was at in my life when I saw this movie, and less about the movie itself. And that movie is the Pixar film Ratatouille. Now, this movie came out when I was going to college, and I was going on campus. I was living in a dorm with my friend, and I had just found out a few things. The first was that I lived in Vermont, and I was going to a Vermont college. I found out that since we had moved to New York, I was not going to be able to get the in-state tuition anymore. I was going to be out-of-state tuition, and it was something that I was not going to be able to afford, and so I knew I was not going back to that college, and this sent me into a spiraling depression. And knowing that I wasn't going to come back to where like the college that my friends were, I was moving away, and it really kind of I was in a really bad place. I stopped going to classes. I kind of decided I was going to end up quitting college, and I did end up quitting college in that spring. But I sometime in the winter is when this movie came out, and well, I don't know when the movie came out to theaters, but my college had these movie weekend nights of like recent releases. I don't know how they landed that, but they would play these recent releases in the like the college theater, and so This couple that I was friends with said, "Hey, we're gonna go see this movie. Do you want to come with us?" And I was like, "No, I don't really want to come with you because at the time I was 19, and I was like, I don't need to go see a cartoon movie because I'm better than that, right?" But they persuaded me and they said, "Listen, you should come. It'll be fun." And I said, "You know what? Fine." And I knew going into it that I was going to be the third wheel, going with a couple, not the best thing to do. And kind of exactly what happened. But we we went into the theater, we sat down, and I think they were playing the ads before the movie even started. And the couple said, "You know what? We're actually going to go." I was like, "Oh, great." So they got up and left. And so I decided, well, I'm already here. I'm just going to watch it alone. And in my deep depressive phase, I watched this uplifting movie. There's a quote in the movie. And for anyone that doesn't know, Ratatouille is about a mouse who wants to cook because he has the talent, but he's a mouse. And so he can't because he wants to cook with these like human people. And of course, humans, as soon as you see a mouse, what do? You're going to try and kill it. And so there's this other employee who is a human, and he is working in this kitchen, and he's terrible at everything in the kitchen. And so then he and this mouse sort of form this bond, and that's kind of what the movie is about. But there's this quote in the movie that comes up and up and up, and it's just anyone can cook. And for some reason, that line in that moment just meant so much to me that, like, anyone can do anything, basically, is what the line means. And I think that was just something I needed to hear at that point because I was so, like, down in the dumps and I just couldn't even think about, like, doing anything. And that, like, motivational line just kind of, while it didn't get me to change, my behavior or how I felt about things, it was just a movie and a line that kind of was something I would reflect upon a lot as the next couple of years came along. And it's a good movie, and I think it's an underrated Pixar film. I think it's better than a lot of the Pixar movies that people really like. So if you like Pixar movies and you haven't seen it, I definitely encourage you to give it a shot. All right, we're moving into the top three, and if there's a movie aside from P.S. I Love You that I think people might make fun of me for picking, it's going to be this one. And that's okay. That's perfectly okay. My top three, number three, most emotionally impactful movie is Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. Yep, episode 3. I said it. I know. Why is this movie so impactful? Well, at the start of this video, I told you that if there were going to be spoilers said, at least very significant ones, I would warn you. This entire conversation is probably going to be pretty spoilery about Revenge of the Sith. So if you haven't seen it for some ungodly reason, then skip ahead, I guess. But I can't imagine that most of you watching this haven't seen this movie already, if you're a Star Wars fan. If not, then of course, why would you see it? So, Revenge of the Sith. I was a kid. I saw it in theater. I had seen the previous 2 in theaters. And I was a big fan of the original trilogy as well. So that's 5 movies. And they were really all aimed at building up this one movie, right? So you had the original trilogy, which came right after number 3. And in the original trilogy, you kind of hear a lot of things, like about the Clone Wars, about how Anakin Skywalker was, this good Jedi. And then you see the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, and you experience the Clone Wars, and you experience the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And there's a lot of really cool things that happen in Episode 3. You also get to see Padme. And as Padme and Anakin's relationship develop, you kind of start to understand how much he loves her and why he starts to consider turning to the dark side to save her because he's afraid of what's happening. And then you get to see the Palpatine's manipulation and coercion, and you get to see the Jedi who, from Anakin's point of view, are evil, and a lot of people have noted, yeah, they're kind of not that great. And so the first like half of Revenge of the Sith, there's not really any emotion there, right? It's a very normal Star Wars movie. But as soon as we get Order 66 starting, from then to the end of the film, I just can't tell you how much that movie affected me, because we get to see Palpatine convert Vader, and that was such a big moment. And then Order 66 happens, and all your favorite Jedi are killed. And, as a kid in the theater, I remember seeing my favorite Jedi, Plo Koon, get killed. And, it was so loud in the theater. I hope no one heard it, but I did scream out, no! I was so devastated. And then, we go through Order 66. Everyone's dying. Yoda's feeling it. He's clutching his heart. Oh my god, like, what's happening? You see Commander Cody betray Obi-Wan. That's another very sad moment. And then you, of course, you get Anakin marching on the Jedi Temple with the younglings. Another sad moment. And that's just the start, because then you get to the last part of the movie, which I think is super underrated. You have, Anakin has fled, and Padme is like chasing after him, and she lands the ship, and you have that whole confrontation between Anakin and Padme, where he chokes her to unconsciousness, and then Obi-Wan shows up, and they have this moment, and it's just so impactful because you know where it's going. You've seen their past. You have all this history, and now they're fighting, and it's the best fight in Star Wars history, in my opinion. And then on the other side of things, you have Yoda fighting Palpatine, which is another amazing fight. And I think one of the best scenes in this movie is actually the Senate fight, where you see Yoda and Palpatine on one of those round circular like Senate platforms, and it's raising up. And the reason why is because as they're fighting and it zooms out, even as a kid, I recognized that it was a fight. It was like Jedi versus Sith, and good versus evil, and a dictator versus a republic. And it just had all these like meanings to it, and it was just so impactful. And then the battles happen, and it goes forever, and this battle is awesome. And then the battle ends, and what happens to Anakin is so brutal, and that's just, also emotional. And you see Obi-Wan like, I loved you, Anakin, and you just feel terrible there. And then he leaves, and Padme dies giving birth, and that's sad. And they split the kids up, and they send them to, Tatooine and Alderaan, and you know what's going to happen, and that's sad. And Obi-Wan goes into exile, and that's sad. And Yoda goes into exile, and that's sad. And it's sad. And they wipe C-3PO's mind, and that's sad. It's all sad. It's all just sad. And while I agree that a lot of people are going to be like, dude, it's Star Wars, I get that. But this movie, when I was a kid, it really just hit me. And even now, sometimes I'll be just sitting here, bored, and I'll just put on Revenge of the Sith. I won't even watch the first half. I'll just start it at Order 66, and I'll just watch that part till the end, and every time. I just really liked it. So that's my Revenge of the Sith rant. I know it's kind of a very hot take, and I'm okay with that. I love that movie, and I will always defend it. So, but let's move on to maybe some two more serious picks that maybe you guys will really understand. All right, the second most impactful movie emotionally that I've ever seen is a movie I saw when I was a kid. And it's stuck with me ever since, and I've rewatched it a couple times, and it's Empire of the Sun. This movie is also the oldest movie on this list. It came out in 1987, a year before I was born. If you haven't seen this movie, it is spectacular. Earlier, I was talking about combat-focused war stories. This is a war story that isn't focused on combat. It's actually focused on like living through a concentration camp, and it follows the story of this kid. He's actually played by Christian Bale. I think it's like his second role ever, but nailed it. Uh, this movie is insanely good, and it focuses around. It's been a while since I've seen it, and I read a summary the other day, so I might get a few of these details wrong, but bear with me. I'll try and do my best. I think it happens during World War II, and what happens is this kid is British, and he lives with his rich British family in Japan, I think. And I forgot why they're there. They're in business or something. And then Pearl Harbor happens, and Japan declares war on the United States. And basically, if you're an American living in Japan, you're fucked because you're in Japan. And so immediately the family loses their status, and they're trying to flee. Unfortunately, the parents get separated from the kid in the massive crowds, and the kid ends up kind of having to fend for himself. And that's really what the movie focuses on. He gets put in a camp, and a lot of bad shit happens, and it's kind of his journey of trying to survive. And it's just such a good movie, but I don't want to ruin any of it for anyone. So all I can say is that there's a song that's sung in this, and I think it's called Suo Guan. I'm not sure. I believe it's like a Japanese song, but holy crap, it's so good. And Christian Bale sings it in the movie as well, and it just every time blows me away. If you want a really good war story that doesn't focus on the combat so much, watch Empire of the Sun. It's a long movie, but it's a really, really good one. Quick correction, Christian Bale didn't actually sing the song, and it's actually called Suo Gan, not Guan. That was my mistake. Before we get on to the first most impactful movie, I'm going to play a clip of that music because it's so good, and I want more people to see this movie. So that's John Williams' Suo Gan, and I think that's just I don't think he came up with that. I think that's just his adaptation of a song from Japan, and I could be completely wrong on that. I don't know. If you haven't listened to it in full, I strongly recommend you look up John Williams, Suogan, and listen to the song. It's great. Let's move on to movie number 1. So here we are. We've hit my favorite movie of all time. This is a movie that I've rewatched many times, and I don't really like rewatching movies. But this movie, for some reason, whenever I'm ridiculously just depressed or just not feeling great, I pop this movie in. And I said before that I don't cry during movies, and that's true. This movie has been the exception. I have actually shed a tear or two for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Now, a lot of people might think, wow, what a mediocre movie. To me, it's the best movie I've ever seen. I think it's just a spectacular story. The music is amazing, and you're best going into this film blind as fuck, because honestly, it's so good. It's really slow in the beginning, so I understand if some people are like, man, that movie is fucking boring as hell. I get that. If you can stick with it for a little bit longer than, I think it's like half an hour, it really starts to pick up, and once you get a little bit farther than that, it gets even better. This movie stars Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, and wow, it's just such a cool story. The basic premise is, imagine you were born at your oldest. So you're born in your 90s basically as a baby, and as you grow up, you're actually growing younger. That's the premise of the movie. That's really all I want to say about the premise of the movie. Again, this movie has an amazing musical track, of which I will, again, play some of it at the end of this video. My favorite music, maybe of all time. It's just so good. And the movie has so many emotional beats, and then combined with the music, it just, I don't know, it always made me feel a certain way. It has a romantic subplot, and I guess really the movie is probably classified as a romantic comedy, but or a dramedy maybe. To me, the romance always was like a side plot, and there's just a lot of other stuff in the movie that really was my thing. I'm not really normally a romantic type of movie fan. I just prefer like regular dramas, and maybe that's why this movie resonated so well. Is because it's not really just about romance; it has a lot of other stuff to it, and I really want to talk more about it, but I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Watch the damn movie if you haven't seen it. It's so good, and if you watch it and you think I'm crazy, then come back and tell me I'm an idiot. But this is my favorite movie of all time, and I don't know if it'll ever be beaten, honestly. I guess we'll find out. But it's a really good movie. So, with that, that's my top 10 favorite, most, or I guess top 10 most emotionally resonated films for me. I'm not sure that this is my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Certainly, a lot of them are probably in my top 10, but many of the early picks, especially, I don't really remember all that well. I just remember the emotional connection I had to when I first watched them. So I just don't know that I could count some of them in my top 10 of all time, especially like Bicentennial Man or P.S. I Love You. They're definitely not in my top 10 of all time. But you know what? Most of these movies are definitely worth watching at least once. And if you haven't seen them, give it a shot. I strongly recommend it. All right, so here's a clip from the music. If you want to look up the whole thing in full, it's called a Bethena, a concert waltz, I believe, or Bethena. I'm not quite sure on the pronunciation there, but it's Bethena, a concert waltz. It's amazing.